I'm one of those people that grew up knowing I was going to join the military. I'm a first-generation American citizen, so there was a lot of pride.
Hi, and welcome to Common Denominator. I'm Moshe Popek, and today we talk with Andy Bustamante. Andy is a former covert CIA intelligence officer, decorated wartime military veteran, and U.S. Air Force Academy graduate. He's now a prolific Fortune 10 corporate advisor where he specializes in human and technical operations, and he'll provide spy tips, tactics, and insights to give you an advantage in everyday life.
The day that you walk across the seal at CIA headquarters, it's not like you feel lukewarm about your career. You are absolutely on fire. You are never going to leave. Fear has to be part of the equation for courage to even exist. So when people feel like they look at somebody and that person is fearless and courageous, you can't have those two things at the same time.
Hi, Andy, and welcome to Common Denominator.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me here, Moshe.
So, want to go back in time, and I know you have a lot of history with military, but when did that spark interest for you? When did you decide, you know what, I'm going to go to the military?
So I'm one of those people that grew up knowing I was going to join the military. My family, it was all veteran family. My cousins were all going military. My aunts and my uncles were all military. I'm a first generation American citizen. So there was a lot of pride in the 80s and 90s when I was growing up in going military. It was just a matter of whether I was going to go enlist or whether I was going to try to become an officer, if I would go to college and then go to ROTC. It was never a question of if, it was just a matter of when and how. I think what was interesting to me is I didn't know intelligence was a direction I wanted to go until after I started with the military, because as the military has always been so good at, it opens your eyes to opportunities that you otherwise didn't know existed. It's, in my opinion, active duty service is even better than college.
And you ended up enlisting for the Air Force. Why the Air Force? What was that?
It's funny. I was applying to multiple academies. I went to an academy, which is one of the government-funded universities that are run by the military. So I applied to the Naval Academy, I applied to West Point, I applied to the Air Force Academy, and it just so happens that the Air Force Academy offered me two things. They offered me a fast acceptance letter, and they took me the farthest away from home. And I really didn't want to stay in Pennsylvania, and I really didn't want to stay in the Northeast.
Mm. And you became, because I have a whole thought process on nuclear power, but you were, and I want to get into that in a second, but you were a nuclear missile officer? What does that entail?
Yeah, so the people who actually sit underground with the nuclear launch codes and the nuclear launch keys around their neck, those people are called nuclear missile officers. And that was my Air Force specialty code, AFSC. That Air Force specialty code is 13 Sierra, and there's only ever a few 113 Sierras at a time. And even now, as you and I are talking, there are somewhere to about 80 to 120 men or women who are 100 feet underground in different locations around the United States with nuclear launch codes in a safe and a launch key around their neck.
Wow. Just regarding nuclear power, because they have all this stigma, and I know France, I think it's something like 65% of their power, it comes from nuclear. We're always looking for alternative forms of energy. Knowing what you know about nuclear power, are there enough redundancies that it's safe at this point?
You're asking a great question, because anytime you're engaging in a nuclear force, you need to have multiple redundancies to ensure safety and security. But, whether you're talking about a nuclear power plant or a nuclear warhead, you've got two different types of risks, because a nuclear warhead is a stable warhead. The thing you have to worry about with that is decay due to maintenance or the loss of what we call positive control. Positive control in the nuclear arsenal world means two human beings are awake, alert, and have possession of the munition. So at no point is a nuclear armament in the control of just one person at one time. Positive control dictates any nuclear warhead is in control with at least two human beings actively, attentively aware of their control of that device. Compare that to nuclear energy. Nuclear energy is not static. It's not stagnant, right? It's dynamic. There's There's water, there's cooling, there's increasing and decreasing of isotopes. It's a very dangerous and active process. So you need redundancies against two different things, but you do need redundancies nonetheless. I will also say that nuclear anything, nuclear power, nuclear weapons, they're a shortcut. They're a shortcut to high yield energy with high risk, which is why World War II drove us to create nuclear power. That was a high risk tolerance time period, right? Where now, look at a windmill. A windmill creates an incredible amount of power, but is very low risk and does not need, multiple redundancies. So hopefully we're going to see a transition away from the dependence that we have on nuclear energy, but we don't know what we're going to see that transition to.
Mm. Yeah, I think that I remember I saw in Westchester they decommissioned. Maybe it was it could have been a nuclear plant in Westchester recently, maybe the past 2 years, and then New York City needed power, so they ended up bringing in coal. So
yep,
that was something. Originally, when you were joining the military, you wanted to be part of the Peace Corps. Somehow, you ended up joining the CIA. Walk us through, whatever you can share, that experience. So, someone approached you, you were recruited. What actually happened there?
So this was 2006, which, for anybody who was an adult and a professional in 2006, it was kind of the dawning of online applications. And I was applying to the Peace Corps online, trying to put in my submission to the Peace Corps while I was still in uniform with the Air Force. And it was actually during that online process that I had a red screen pop up that said, hey, based on your qualifications, I already put in my bio, my background, answered all their questions. Based on your submission, we think you might be qualified for other roles in the U.S. federal government. Would you be willing to pause your application for 72 hours so a recruiter can contact you? I'm 26 years old at the time, so I'm always open for new opportunities at 26 years old, right? It doesn't matter if it's females or if it's a better restaurant or if it's a better drink. I'll say yes to a new opportunity. Mm-hmm. So I put myself on hold, and then 24 hours later, I got a phone call from an unlisted number. It was only attributable to the 703 area code, which is Langley, Virginia. And a woman on the other end of the phone, didn't really introduce herself at all, but she confirmed I was the same Andrew who was applying for Peace Corps, and that I put my application on hold, and I had not completed my complete application. And that's kind of what set me off on the process of then physically traveling to Virginia and physically interviewing with CIA.
They always say, once you join, I don't know if this is true. Again, I'm going to ask questions like make it a little more specific, and you could tell me if you can't answer some of them. But they always say, once you join the CIA, it's kind of for lifetime. Is that actually how it goes? Because you're right. It's
very true. It's very true for a number of reasons, right? Yeah. First, CIA is not stupid. They recruit very, very effectively. They're recruiting people who already want to give up everything to work for CIA. So imagine a hiring process for your business where you only hire people who are the most passionate, the most dedicated, the most self-sacrificial possible to make your business work. CIA has the benefit of being able to do that. It's a 9 to 18 month application process. They go through multiple rounds of interviews and vetting and testing and personality profiling. And then, of course, you have not just the lifespan of the United States, but the British MI6 before that. Espionage has been around for a long time, back to the Egyptian pharaohs. So as espionage professionals understand the human mind so well that they know exactly how to get the right kind of person. So the day that you walk across the seal at CIA headquarters, it's not like you feel lukewarm about your career. You are absolutely on fire. You are never going to leave. So even now, having left CIA, having started my own business, having had incredible success outside of CIA, if I were to get a phone call today from CIA asking me for anything, right, I would say yes. Even though I disagree with them, even though I know some of the people there are assholes, even though they're full of problems, the mission is so strong, right? The support and security of the United States. How can you say no to that? You can't say no to that. So that's a big part of why once you're in, you never leave. It's not because they're going to shoot you in your sleep. It's because they already know that you're so conditioned to believe in the mission that they could ask for anything.
Yeah, it's interesting. Friend of mine's son, he's a lone soldier in Israel, and sounds exactly like that. I'm going. This is the mission. Parents say whatever they want to say, and that's it, right? So there's a certain character trait you can't. That's just what it is, right? They also say, right. I assume you're married. You mentioned you had children, right? And they say also once you're part of CIA, you shouldn't have any attachments, right? No,
Yeah.
right? So you shouldn't, right? Because you shouldn't have any ways to be blackmailed, right? There's that.
Yeah, the whole attachment thing is a double-edged sword, right? Because CIA doesn't want you to have any external attachments. They don't want you attached to a wife who's outside of CIA. They don't want you attached to, friends or partners or anybody who's outside of CIA, businesses outside of CIA, children outside of CIA. But they love it when you become attached to people inside CIA. There's a lot of what we call intramural dating, because people in that high stress and high stakes, high intelligence environment, they end up rotating and dating each other. And CIA loves that because it's easy to do an 18-hour day when all of your friends and your lover and your everything is at the building or in the building or on the covert network that is run by the building. So the attachments thing is they want you attached on the inside, not on the outside. What they lost my wife and I because we became attached on the inside and then wanted to build a life for ourselves on the outside with children that were not under the umbrella of CIA. So that was the big part of what drove us to leave. We didn't have a beef or discouragement or disappointment with the CIA. It was just that we wanted to build a family and CIA wanted us to be clandestine officers first. We wanted to be parents first. They wanted us to be operatives first.
When you told them that you were going to make a life somewhere else, I guess they were okay with it. I mean, sure, there's classified stuff that you have to go through and short checkups and things like that, right?
Yeah, there are protocols that were in place that nobody ever used. It was pretty funny because it was 2014 when I left, which was the last 2 years of the Obama administration. And, the attrition out of CIA was less than 2%. So less than 2% of people left, period. That includes retirees. And the vast majority of that 2% was people who left on Friday to retire and then started the following Monday as a private intelligence contractor, right? Working for somebody else, but still inside the building. So when my wife and I left, we executed on our separation. We submitted and went through the whole 2-year fiasco. It's a long time. You've got to do an out processing brief. You have to do a full operational review of your history. All this stuff has to happen before they are willing to raise their hand and say, yes, this person is former CIA. They used to be in operations and, they can speak about their background. Now, at the end of those 2 years, 2016, Donald Trump takes office and then the whole world explodes, right? And part of the world exploding was Donald Trump dividing himself as an executive away from CIA. Well, now you have all these CIA officers who start leaving CIA. Attrition more than quadruples. Now CIA is losing, upward of one officer per month. Which is obviously, that's 30 people a year from the covert ranks, just an incredible amount of attrition. And their process for being able to roll back or reveal the covers, the backgrounds of those people is so time consuming that there are hundreds of officers who are former CIA out in the world right now who can't say that they're former CIA.
And I think at the last I read, I don't know if the CIA's budget is this, and I always wondered about that. They have this, maybe it's $80 billion now a year black budget. Does that go under CIA? Is that part of payroll or things that whatever the CIA needs to be done? Is it through that black budget?
So the black budget is a classified number, and so is CIA's official budget, also is a classified number. Both of those are tightly controlled by the Senate and the House. But the black budget is actually controlled by the Director of National Intelligence, the DNI, and he or she can attribute that money wherever they want it to go. But a big part of what funds that black budget is when covert operations become profitable, right? So when a
Right.
covert operation seizes cryptocurrency, when a covert operation seizes gold, when a covert operation builds a business that becomes a profitable business, right? Whether that's in the oil industry or the gardening industry, it doesn't matter. The money needs to go somewhere. So what they do is they funnel it all into this black budget, and then they basically use those profits to fund ongoing uh, covert actions that happen in other parts of the world that need to be misattributed to the United States government.
Right. Because I did hear that not expected, but some of these businesses and some of these things are actually end up being profitable all over the world.
Yep.
And, surprisingly, right? So they just, they did it for strategic reasons and they end up being super successful. Is there, I know this is way outside the box, but maybe from a CIA intelligence, would you say, there's a lot of conversation now about extraterrestrial life. Just curious about that because there's a lot in the mainstream media about that nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, and from my experience, what you see when you see people talk about extraterrestrial or alien life, you're seeing people grasping for something that's irrational. It's rational to believe that there is alien life, that there is intelligent life in the universe. It's rational to believe that because probability-wise, it's almost impossible that there isn't. I mean, even here just on Earth, human beings aren't the only intelligent life form on Earth. So why would we believe that there's only one intelligent planet in the vastness of the universe? Just mathematically speaking, of course, there's intelligent life out there. However, to then come to the conclusion or come to the assumption that not only is there intelligent life, but that intelligent life is technologically superior to us, and they've discovered Earth, and they've traveled to Earth, and they've been able to remain undiscoverable from us on Earth, or when we discover them, they just happen to be in cigar-shaped aircraft, or excuse me, cigar-shaped spacecraft, which is exactly what our airplanes look like, or they happen to be in some sort of UFO, circular shape, which is what a balloon looks like. Now the probabilities become less and less. But here's what I will say. Without a doubt, there is something unidentified in the sky, without a doubt. And there's every government agency agrees. There's something unidentified in the sky that poses enough of a national security risk that the Senate and House Intelligence Committees dedicate money, and the president makes a priority, and a whole different government unit has been developed to investigate what is this thing in the sky. Because best case scenario, whatever's happening in the sky is something that's non-threatening and can be identified through the laws of physics or science. Worst case scenario, what's happening in the sky is a threat to us from a known adversary who has an advanced technology that we don't even realize they have. And that worst case is so dangerous that we have to pay attention to it. If you think about it, that worst case scenario is exactly the worst case scenario for Japan that ended Hiroshima and Nagasaki. An unknown threat from the sky of a technology they did not have. We can't let that happen in the United States.
Wow. Are there any, and I know probably everything's classified, but are there any stories from your time in the CIA that you'd be able to share? That, I don't know. Just,
I mean, there's lots of stories. It kind of depends on what you want to talk about. But
something that really stuck out in your mind from your experience that you're able to share. Something that really made an impact on your life.
So I'll tell you right now, I mean, it may be interesting to the entrepreneurs who are paying attention. It may not be interesting to the people who are spy enthusiasts. It's not really a James Bond story, but it's a mind-bending, life-changing story for me. I had a senior officer who always carried 4 dominoes in his pocket, just standard dominoes. He always carried them in his pocket. Whenever he got to his desk, he would stack them on his desk, 2 dominoes next to each other, and then 2 dominoes on top, right? So kind of like in a crisscross pattern. And he always had them with him. Well, one day I was in there and I sat with him and I asked him, I was like, why do you carry these dominoes? Like what? It's extra weight. They're awkward. They jingle when you walk down the hallway. Why would you carry these things? And then he sat them up and he told me most people go through life knocking out tasks or to-dos like this. And he set each of the dominoes up facing him, but in a row from left to right. And then he flicked the domino on the left and knocked it over. And then he flicked the next one and knocked it over, and the next one and the next one. And he knocked all 4 dominoes over with 4 flicks of his finger, right? He said, that's how most people go through life. If you want to succeed in espionage, he said, you have to stack the dominoes differently. So then he put them in a line, the way that we all put the dominoes in line when we're kids, right? One in front of the other, but with only the first one facing him. And then he flicked over the first one, and then the falling domino knocked over the next domino, which knocked over the next domino, which knocked over the next domino. So he was basically demonstrating how the average person will go through life using 4 times as much energy to get the same 4 tasks accomplished as a smart person who puts the things in the correct order. And a light bulb went off for me, because in espionage, and when you're spying in a foreign country, when you're trying to steal secrets that aren't supposed to be stolen, there's an order that you have to accomplish tasks. You can either put a lot of effort into each step, and then by the end of the operation, your resources are spent and you don't know if you're going to be successful, or you can do things in a certain order where they grow momentum with each task. And then you're saving yourself energy, you're saving yourself resources, you're making momentum work for you. And ever since then, I mean, my operational behavior changed, my operational tempo changed, my success at CIA changed. I took that same concept and brought it into the business world when I left CIA. And I mean, my business has grown 300% year over year for the last 4 years. And the only thing I can credit that to is I do the same tasks that everybody else has to do. I just put them in a certain order so that when I flip the first domino, I get the momentum of each falling domino to help with my end goal.
I think that's amazing. For some reason, both my wife and I, we always look backwards. We always think about, okay, this is the result. We have a million things going on. Just result. So how do we get there? Blank space, right? Like completely, you got to know the box, but then you got to be completely out of the box and observe it. No rules. Let's say there's no rules, nothing, but this is where I got to get to. So how are we going to get there? So I love what you're saying. Really, I always say, she went to like Ivy League school, and I say the Ivy League is mastering most of the time, the book, the box.
Yep.
You got to do that, but then you also have to have critical thinking, and that's what I teach my kids. Who said so? In everything, right? Constantly, because that's what business is, right? You're constantly pivoting. But tell us a little bit about Everyday Spy. Tell us a little bit about your business.
Yeah. So my business, Everyday Spy, is it's my personal mission, right? And our mission is to teach spy skills that break barriers to anyone willing to learn. And I love that mission because it's specific, that it applies to anyone who's willing to learn. If you're not willing to learn, you can go to hell. If you don't like spy skills, you can go to hell. If you don't have barriers to break, then you're lying to yourself and you can go to hell. I don't have any time for people who aren't part of my mission. But when it comes to breaking barriers, the truth is that we all have so many barriers in so many different areas of our life that we oftentimes don't stop to realize how they're all related. In an undercover world, the most dangerous thing about an undercover operation is not the operation itself. It's not going in and taking down Osama bin Laden. That's not the most dangerous part. It's not the helicopter ride under cover of dark. It's not the underwater scuba dive ride. It's not the moment when you sit with the warlord at the Jirga table. Those things are not the most dangerous part. It's everything else about living undercover. It's the risk of signing the wrong name on a receipt when you go out to dinner. It's the risk of a cab driver finding out your home address. It's the risk of not tying your shoes the appropriate way, and then when you need it, they come untied and you trip. That's the kind of stuff that is the most dangerous to us because we rehearse the operation dozens upon dozens upon dozens of times. Like it's incredible the amount of rehearsal that goes into a live operation. But there's no rehearsal that goes into waking up and going downstairs and stepping out and making a phone call and catching an Uber. There's no rehearsal that goes into that. So the probability of you making a mistake is so much higher in everyday life. So CIA spends 90% of their money and time training its operatives to handle everyday life undercover. And it spends 10% of its money and time training undercover officers to actually operate because they know that the rehearsal and the practice and the rote memorization is going to make the operation a success. But that person is going to die, crossing the street in Korea because they don't know to look both ways on the center lane, which is where the buses can drive without stopping. So they have to spend all this time training us about everyday life. And those skills are what transformed my career. And then those are the skills that when I left CIA, I was shocked to see people didn't know how to get a free cup of coffee. You don't know how to negotiate your bill. You don't know how to, make somebody disarm somebody from being defensive to being friendly. Those are for me, those are very natural basic skills. So Everyday Spy is my outlet for teaching people all of the cool, not unclassified stuff that CIA did without having to risk any of the actual secrets that keep us safe.
How do people learn? Like, what's the actual process of people learning their secret superpower? I know you talk about that a lot.
Yeah. So CIA hires people because everybody has an inherent talent. There's something inside all of us that gives us an edge against other human beings. And that inherent edge is generally tied to your personality type. And then from your personality type, it's then tied even further to your personal experience in life. So there might be multiple people who are extroverts, but one extrovert grew up in a rich family, another extrovert grew up in a broke family, another extrovert grew up with no mom and dad, another extrovert grew up with gay parents, whatever it might be. So it's not just about understanding your personality, it's also about understanding the conditions in which your personality was cultivated, was raised. So when Everyday Spy goes through the process of teaching people their superpower, what we look at is both how they respond personality-wise, but also how their personal experience, their upbringing shaped their personality. And once you combine those two things together, you have a really solid idea of what strengths and what weaknesses an individual inherently has.
And you also talk about, that people should stop living by other people's rules, which I love. And that really, I think that really takes courage. I mean,
Absolutely.
In society, how do you really get comfortable being, I guess, your true self?
If you feel comfortable, you're probably not being your true self, because we live in a world where conformity is king. If you want to get along, like if you want to get ahead, we're a society that's built on you have to get along. The people who cannot get along and also get ahead are very few and far between, right? And they have to have some kind of superpower that allows them to step over the barrier of social rejection. But what I will say is this: if you feel uncomfortable, and most people who don't play by the rules feel uncomfortable all the time. They go to bed with self-doubt. They wake up with self-doubt. They wonder if today is the day where it all falls apart. But they keep trying anyway. They keep trying anyway. And it's the courage. I mean, what is courage, right? Moshe, courage is doing what you are afraid of anyway. Yep. So you have to be afraid. Fear has to be part of the equation for courage to even exist. So when people feel like they look at somebody and that person is fearless and courageous, you can't have those two things at the same time. That person has to be fearful in order to be courageous. And what you're actually seeing is somebody who's able to take their fear, recognize it, understand it, and take action anyway. And that's what makes just amazing, heroic people.
So I was thinking about this, Andy. What's a practical tip if you're just meeting somebody for the first time to like really know more about them, body language
So
wise?
yeah, it's great. So body language is something that's super helpful, but also it can be misleading. So the first thing to understand is that there's two basic rudimentary forms of body language. There's open language and closed language. So open language is what you are right now, Moshe. Your arms are open, you're leaning back, but your chest is exposed, your face is exposed, you've got a smile on your face, like very open body language. Open usually means receptive or curious. But then closed body language, that's when you see people with their arms crossed or their hands closed together or their legs crossed, right? Or somebody who's kind of got a furrowed eyebrow or a frown. That's closed body language. That means somebody is inherently suspicious or trying to keep themselves distant. If you just understand those two basic rudimentary forms of body language, when you see open language, you can lean in with more aggressive or more penetrating questions. When you see closed language, you want to talk less about, you want to ask fewer questions and instead talk more about yourself. Share more about your thoughts, your feelings, your views of the world. Because what you need to do is crack through their closed body language. And if you've ever had that moment where you've seen somebody relax because of something you've said, right? Like you said, "Oh, I'm a God-fearing man." And then all of a sudden you see the person uncross their arms and smile. Or you say, "I'm a dad of 11, right? I'm a dad of an army." And you see somebody chuckle and then open their arms. Like you have to crack through that closed body language. But what often happens is that people don't understand it. So they see closed body language and then they start peppering questions. And they don't realize what they're doing is they're just cementing that closed body language into place. You have to open the person up by talking about yourself and disarming them.
I know that a lot of the consulting that you do with, it's like top CEOs, Fortune 10 companies, right? Which we talked about in the intro. What is their, like the true, like you peel the layers back, what's the common denominator of them? Like what's actually going on there? Because it's
what's
billions of dollars, right?
Yeah. What's fascinating is when you start talking to the people who run multi-trillion dollar, multi-billion dollar companies, when you start talking to the upper echelon of everything, they're all hired. They all work for somebody else. They work for a board of directors. They work for a board of advisors. They work for a CEO who is still, overseeing things, but or they work for an owner who's overseeing the CEO. So what I'm always shocked to find is that when you're dealing with senior level executives, you really are dealing with people who are trying to please someone else. And their challenge is that they carry all this responsibility, all this risk, and everybody beneath them doesn't share that burden. So they feel pinned between a hierarchy of people who don't care as much as they do and an accountability board that isn't as well spoken or well versed as they are. So it's this place in the middle where they are carrying just tons of stress and tons of concern and tons of fear. And the common denominator between all of them is usually that even though they carry all that stress, they find some way to cope with the stress. And they recognize that they're coping with the stress. So what they want is healthy coping mechanisms. Because without knowing what the healthy mechanism is, they will revert to coping in unhealthy ways.
Yeah, I think, right, they recognize they probably I always talk about like the rock bottom moments. They probably had that and they're a very unique type of person. They can handle tremendous pressure. And, right, and there's tools, like you say, to do it. They're doing it, they recognize it, and just it should be healthy, right?
But I also want to highlight that the vast majority of my clients are not owners. They're executives.
Yeah.
When you start talking about the, decimillionaire, centimillionaire CEO owner, that's a person who's developed their own healthy coping mechanisms to build their legacy. It's very, very different. Like your successful entrepreneur has, like, the sky's the limit. They can go anywhere they want. But when you start talking about the CEO of Google, the CEO of YouTube, the CEO of CVS Health, the CEO of Booz Allen Hamilton, those are not the owners. Those are not the people who founded the business. Those are career executives who were hired and vetted, and now they are just carrying out another job. What you do and what I do every day is most certainly not just another job, right?
Yeah.
We are building a legacy for our children. We are wedded to this baby in a way that no CEO who was hired could ever be.
And I assume that when you say the sky's the limit, for a founder, an entrepreneur, I mean, I guess that they figured out their healthy coping mechanisms at some point.
Well, they don't always, but they can. But the main thing that's magic about a founder is that we have the ability to turn ideas into money. There's nothing that stops us. When you're a CEO that's hired, you can have all the best ideas in the world, but you still have to get the board to approve. You still have to get the owner to approve. You still have to get the attorneys to approve. But when you are when you yourself are the owner, CEO, founder, people can advise you against your idea all you want, and you tell them to go to hell because it's your idea, it's your legacy, it's your baby. So what I find is that the people who understand and who want that freedom are destined for success. That's why the sky's the limit, because like they'll soar or they'll crash. And half the time after they crash, they'll get right back up and soar again. Whereas when you're a career COO or a career CFO, one crash and your career's over.
Amazing. So tell me, Andy, what is something today, when you're looking back at your life, what is something that you're deeply grateful for?
I mean, it's a long list, man. There's so many things to be grateful for. But the first thing that comes to my mind is that I'm grateful for my wife and I'm grateful for my children, because my wife is the counterbalance that kept me on a productive path. If you think about a sailboat, right? A sailboat has a giant sail. Well, that entire gigantic sail is controlled by one rope. And that one rope is either, they call it sheeting. You either sheet it in or you sheet it out to gain momentum, to gain speed, to change the direction of the boat. Without my wife, I was a sailboat with a giant sail and I was just blowing in the wind. But when she came along and she sheeted me in, now all of a sudden I was an engine, right? I had an ability to produce something that I couldn't produce otherwise, plow through an ocean. So I'm grateful for my wife. And then my children became my navigational guide. They became what I was working for. So now I had my wife to turn me into a motor, like turn me into a power force. And I had my children to show me the way of where I wanted to go. Without them, I'd still be floating in the ocean, big shiny sail, and flopping around in the waves.
Really love that. And what's something about you that people don't know?
I think that
there's
people,
a lot.
Yeah,
There's
a lot there too, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I think people don't realize is that I have every intention of completely disappearing. And I'm not here to be a celebrity. I'm not here to be an internet personality. I'm not here to be someone that speaks for the next 30 years. I'm here to build a business, turn my business over to a very effective executive team, and then I'm going to fall off the face of the earth. And my goal was to fall off the face of the earth by the time I'm 45. But now with where the business is going, I've had to readjust my goal to 48. So hopefully I can be just completely off the grid by 48. And the world forgets I ever existed by the time I turn 50.
Yeah, it's I always say, I live in Miami where we have a farm, and it's the most peaceful, normal place. I see the kids out with the animals, just normal, simple. We forget that, and that's where our peace comes from, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I want to thank you so much, Andy. It's been great. Much success. Peace, happiness. How can people learn more about you and maybe even sign up for your program?
Absolutely. You can find me at everydayspy.com. You can find me on social media if you look at Everyday Spy. My podcast is called the Everyday Spy Podcast. And then, of course, in the description of this episode, we'll have a link to my Spy Superpower quiz. So folks can use any one of those options to find me in whatever direction or platform they prefer.
Thank you so much, Andy. Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Hope you enjoyed my conversation with Andy. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, we'd be grateful for a like, share, and subscribe. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, feel free to leave a rating and review. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you again soon.